good, isn't he? Hey. Okay, we're doing a series about embracing the will of the Father. And one of the things that I started to talk about last week, I tried to communicate with you, is that there's a difference between God's strategic plan and God's tactical plan. In fact, when Kim was reading out the scriptures from Hebrews chapter 6, they are wonderful scriptures that talk about God's strategic plan. His plan and his counsel is immutable. Immutable means it doesn't change. It's a big word, but it just means it doesn't change. You can't change God's strategic goal. He is clear that the kingdoms of our Lord, the kingdoms of this world belong to the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ. So that's God's strategic goal. Jesus is going to be exalted over all the nations. Jesus is king. Jesus is Lord. That's his strategic goal. But tactically, God does make changes. Tactically, God requires us to mix faith with his promises. So on the one hand, God doesn't change because he has a goal that he's moving towards in history. But because he's created us in his image and created us with choice, you and I have the option of whether or not we're going to mix faith with the promise of God. And we talked last week about how the children of Israel, as they were wandering in the wilderness, that judgment that came from God came because of their unbelief in not mixing faith with the promises. And so the very generation that God intended to go into the promised land was a generation that died in the wilderness.